I think the question I get asked most often from people is, how do you become a comedian? And the answer is really simple. You just start doing. And I know that sounds crazy. Basically, the first step is writing. You just pull out a notebook and start writing down the things you think are funny. I feel like the majority of comics I see starting out, their first few times out, they make a mistake where they're writing what they think other people will think is funny. And they themselves don't even think what they're saying is funny. So let's say you've written a couple of minutes worth of material, hopefully what you think is about 5 minutes worth of material. But I would suggest writing down what you're going to say verbatim and then try to get rid of any extra words. You really want to get to the punchline as fast as possible. The longer you do this long build up, you're digging yourself a hole. Once you start to lose people's attention, it's so hard to get it back. Which I've probably already lost everyone's attention already in this video. It's got to be so fucking boring. Anyway, I don't know. I figured some people would find this interesting. I get asked it all the time, so someone out there wants to know. Once you get 5 minutes or so of material, you're gonna want to go to an open mic night. Now, if you just Google open mic nights in your area, you'll find some. They typically give you about 5 minutes, unless you're in like New York or LA, in which case they can give you like 2 or 3. If you get a shorter time, don't try to fit 5 minutes of material into a 2 to 3 minute bit. If you get the light, don't panic. That doesn't mean jump off right then. Just wrap up what you're talking about and get off. Generally speaking, the first time is just getting over the nerves of getting up for the very first time. It's stressful. You know, your mind runs 1,000 miles an hour. Once you get that first one out of the way, anything you did that got laughs, keep. Anything that didn't, you're going to want to revisit or get rid of. Work it in some other way. Anything that worked, my suggestion, if I could say words, my suggestion is the next time you get up, do what I call hammocking, which is when you're building an act, you've got jokes that you now know work. So what you do is you put a known working joke on either side of a new joke. So if that new joke fails, you can get the audience right back with that other joke. It's just like hammering out a samurai sword. Once you have more jokes that work, then you can fit in more newer jokes, or just go up with an entirely new 5 minutes and see how it works. Keep the jokes that work. You'll start figuring out placement for them. If you've got a bunch of jokes on the same topic, like I've got, I don't know, 5 minutes on driving a cab. It's not necessarily intuitive as to where the material goes best together. It's a puzzle. It's all a puzzle. So play with it. Switch them back and forth. See where it works best together. I know some comics that suggest always changing it, doing different order, which keeps it organic, but then just keep building it, working it, getting it better. If you want to get really good at stand-up, it's all about writing as much as possible, which I really should do more of. I don't know a single comic that feels like, I do plenty. It's very few. Not everyone is Louis C.K. I say that because he writes an hour a year. Ralphie May says he writes 2 hours a year. There's a guy I was reading about in this book who writes like an hour every 3 months or something. He can't help it. It's like he's neurotic about it. He has to write. Not everyone's like that, obviously. I know plenty of people that don't write anything unless something comes to them. In which case, more life experiences are good. You know, don't just sit at home and wait for something to come on the TV. As far as material, no one can tell you how to be funny. And I say that because everyone's sense of humor is different. You can figure out your own sense of humor by the types of things that make you laugh. So if you like dark humor, if that's what makes you laugh, you're probably going to write stuff like that. That doesn't mean copy a comic style. And definitely don't copy any jokes. Don't ever take any jokes. It's comedic death, essentially. Once you start building material, you're going to be going to open mics. That way you'll start running into other comics. When comics start to meet you, then they'll invite you out to do a guest spot on an actual show. The way a show typically runs, there's a host who goes up and warms up the crowd. Then there's a guest spot if there is one. And then there's a feature or a middle act. And then there's the headliner. And basically the way it goes is you go to an open mic until you get really good, and then you started to get invited to do real shows. And you'll find that the dynamic of an audience at a real show is a little different, and it varies venue to venue even. It's a little different than it is at an open mic. I feel like I'm getting too into the minutia of this. But at any rate, you'll get really good at doing a guest spot, then they'll have you host. Unless it's New York, the host, I think New York is where they consider like the host one of the most important people on the show. Everywhere else, host is the low man on the totem pole, typically. You'll host, and then you'll feature. Features tend to be between like 20 and 30 minutes. A guest spot is 5 minutes. Host is 10 to 15, sometimes as low as like 7. Some clubs, they work backwards, meaning they'll find out how much time the headliner wants to do. The Improv around here, they want to set 90-minute time for a show. So if the headliner wants to do an hour, you've only got 30 minutes to split up between the feature and the host, unless it's a two-man show. If the feature's doing 20 minutes, that means that the host is only doing 10. But not every club works that way. As you start to get better at hosting, then you'll become a feature. When you start to feature, that's when you can start to go out on the road. I started a little prior to featuring, but basically what I was doing was going with comics who were already going out that I knew I could stay with, and hitching a ride with them and hosting a show if there was no host, or doing guest spots, so that I got experience doing stand-up in different places. People's sense of humor changes just a little around the country. Not a lot, in my experience. Typically, jokes that work, in one place, I don't know, it might be different in places like Portland or something. I've heard they get super offended by anything. But I don't know, I've never been to Portland, so what do I know? But once you become a feature, then you can start traveling around the country, doing shows in various places. You're not going to make a lot of money. Typically, comics sell something after shows, like shirts or shot glasses or DVDs. The reason they do that is because the pay is typically not that much, and it offsets it. I mean, driving across the country when gas was $3.80 a gallon was not an easy task. That really made it difficult, especially for a feature. I think that's pretty much all you need to know. Once you get to that level, then I think you've pretty got it. You got it pretty well figured out. There's nothing that feels better than making an entire room of strangers laugh. It's an unbelievable feeling. You're not going to be able to make every audience laugh. You're just not going to be able to. You'll find you've got a demographic, whatever that may be. I'm kind of hit and miss with really old people. Sometimes old people really love me, and sometimes they hate me. I don't know. I feel like I'm forgetting something. The stories you tell your friends to make them laugh, try telling those. Anything that's about you is really good to tell, because no one's going to come up with that. Now that Donald Trump's president, how many different people do you think have a Donald Trump joke about his hair? Or the fact that he's orange? There's only going to be so many spins on the way Donald Trump looks. So that's why I say writing about yourself is better. But again, every comic's different, So I don't want to tell you what to, as far as material is concerned, but that's probably a good thing, is to write about yourself. And I hope that helps, man. I don't know who wants to know this, but if you want to try it, just write. Get up on stage the first time. It's getting past those jitters the first time is probably the hardest part, and it will never go away. It'll get easier, but it never goes away. Even I've heard Seinfeld say it never goes away. So just to take away all the, I'm gonna be Kevin Hart or whatever. An overnight success in stand-up comedy, I've heard, is about 10 years. Daniel Tosh didn't make his first TV appearance until 7 years in, I think. Ralphie May, when he won Last Comic Standing, he was about 14 years in. I think it was Dave Chappelle that said he might never make it, but if he could make as much money as a teacher doing stand-up comedy, then he would feel that he made it. Because he could do something he loved as opposed to doing something just as a means to an end. Anyway, I hope that helps. If you have any questions, write them in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. I might do a follow-up video if I get enough questions. And subscribe. I'm going to be making more of these, so let me know what you think.